Matt, welcome to Going Live with Good Soil, episode 65, I think now, I think we're at. And just a reminder, we're on Twitter Spaces with the new Tesla Tuesdays and our YouTube live stream at the same time. Only Matt and I can be heard on YouTube Live, so if Bradford or someone else is talking on Twitter Spaces, it will not be part of that. So we have to just be cognizant of that. And then after about an hour of our normal episode on the YouTube live stream, which is recorded there, we will probably cut that off and then just go to live interactive discussion on Twitter Spaces for the last 20 or 30 minutes until the next up, I think, is Bradford and Robert Scoble after us again. So looking forward to another Tuesday. Matt, how are you doing?
Good, thanks. It's been kind of a crazy week since we last spoke. I mean, markets were just in free fall essentially. Fed seems like it's out for blood, so I'm sure we'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, interesting, interesting week for sure. How about you, Emmet? How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. I think I'm doing well considering the market's been in free fall. I mean, today I woke up and I was like, all right, pre-market. I looked early and it was up, but just in the last half hour, the whole market's kind of rolled over. You know, the Nasdaq kind of collapsed, capitulated. The S&P, everything's just, I don't know what event happened in the last half hour or hour, but Tesla's still holding on to some gains for the day. It sounds like we'll talk about Tesla a lot. And I'm sure that's the big part of our show. But first, we typically talk about the macro markets a little bit. And I mean, the Fed, Powell, his language was pretty as hawkish as could be. Market just, as you said, has been going down the last week. And are we at a bottom, Matt? I mean, the macro market is so tricky. Part of me thinks that I'm being more and more convinced of a potential narrative where Powell and the Fed is just like determined to make sure inflation does not crop up and just kind of they're going to stuff it out, any way they can by raising rates and ruining the economy. That's secondary to them. They just, they even, I guess their unemployment rate that they can tolerate, they raised even to be higher for next year. So they're like setting the stage to continue raising rates. Or, part of me thinks that they're going to get to like this 4 to 5% interest rate, terminal rate, restrictive rate, he called it a few times. And they're just going to keep it there. And the economy will recover from that. But they'll just keep it at this 4 to 5% rate for potential a long time. And the narrative will be like, hey, remember that time in 10 years where interest rates were like zero and all those crazy things started happening, like cryptocurrencies, NFTs, SPAC mania, everyone starting up a startup out of the garage because cash was free. We can't let that happen again. We have to keep rates at 4% or 5% indefinitely. I feel like that could be like a widely accepted narrative pushed forward. And I'm a little worried about that, but I think Tesla will still fare well and grow. The good growth stocks will, but a lot of innovation will not happen with interest rates that high going forward. I don't know. What do you think that narrative is a realistic possibility?
Yeah, I mean, like I think it's unrealistic to have 0% interest rates for any extended period of time. So I think in the long arc of history, we'll probably look back and say, yeah, that was that was. Oh my God.
Matt is on YouTube Live. I hear you, Matt, just fine, actually. Matt, we hear Matt. I think something's up with you, Bradford, because I think you're on Twitter. I'm on Twitter Spaces, and on Twitter Spaces, we hear you. I'm on Twitter Spaces. Matt, you're fine.
Okay. Well, it's all right. My AirPods are
Matt, you
coming
can keep
through.
going.
It says
You're
that I'm
fine.
connected on
Yeah, you're
Twitter.
fine.
So
You're
anyway,
fine. Yeah, I'm listening to you on Twitter Spaces. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's tough to assume that you could realistically have 0% interest rates for an extended period of time because it does kind of incentivize bubbles or kind of excessive speculation. So I think we are going to have higher rates going forward, but it's a question of is it 4% or does the Fed lower rates? I kind of think we're going to see some deflationary signs in the next 6-12 months, something like that. There's just a lot of signs that commodity prices in particular are starting to come down, and there's also a lot of signs that the economy is really starting to slow down, which I think is frankly what the Fed's trying to do. But my sense is they're kind of using a sledgehammer when just a regular hammer would do. Um,
Mhm. Yeah.
so yeah, I'm a little concerned that they're being too aggressive.
Yeah. They have a big Powell is talking tomorrow to kick off some banking conference, I believe. So I think the whole market's a little jittery after last week, and it's crazy. I feel like the whole market's just like hanging on to every word or every tone of Powell going forward for a while now, and tomorrow is going to be like very skittish. I don't know. The market could go up 2% or down 2% the moment he starts talking. I feel like tomorrow, even though it's not supposed to be like a market moving event, they're just waiting for him to give like an updated tone or language or anything about speaking about what his outlook is, and then at the end of the week, there's the PCE index and core PCE, release, and that's on Friday. So that's like a data point. I think the Fed's probably looking at if they're looking at these monthly data points, even really carefully.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm curious. I've seen a little bit of speculation lately that the Fed was kind of trying to front load a lot of the pain. One, just to really get ahead of inflation, but two, to potentially be a little like political, where you can be backing off the pedal or changing the language into November, which could be, if you have a market rally, let's say going into like late October, early November, maybe the Fed changes course a little bit with the November FOMC meetings,
Yeah.
actually just like the week before elections, the midterms. Do you give any credence to that theory, or how do you think the kind of political influence may play into it?
Yeah, we were on an interesting chat yesterday with these Prometheus guys and some other fund managers, and one of the guys, Michael Wang, who ran a big hedge fund previously before starting this Prometheus thing, he brought up an interesting stat saying that in 100% of cases in the last like
80 years, I think it was.
80 years, yeah, if every midterm election that November or whatever, in 100% of cases, a year after that midterm election, the market has been higher from when that midterm election happened. In 100% of cases in the last 80 years. To me, that was an astounding stat. Like 100%. He didn't say 80% or 90%. He said 100% of cases in the last 80 years of that. So I guess 40, what would that be?
That'd be 40 cases, I guess. Well, no, because midterms would
20,
be
20,
20,
20
so it'd be
cases.
20. Yeah.
Yeah, but still 20
But
for
20 out of
20.
20, that's
That's
like, even
impressive.
19 out of 20 would be a lot different stat.
Yeah. So, I mean, it doesn't, it seems like we're maybe at a bottom or close to a bottom. It feels like that. But I also have this, there's two things I think the Fed is fighting. It's fighting, number one, everyone knows they're fighting inflation, right? That's like the cover of the book, right? But inside the book is the inflation expectations. And I think that's a separate thing. It's related, obviously, but it's a separate thing. And I think maybe Powell, part of me thinks, I don't know, conspiracy thinking type me thinks that really what they're fighting is inflation expectations right now. And they know they're going to pivot in the near term, but they don't want anyone to think that's going to happen, because if they let anyone think that's going to happen, then they're losing the battle with inflation and expectations, right? So they have to get ahead of
Mhm.
inflation expectations really in order to beat inflation. And the way to do that is you got to be really harsh and strong up front, make everyone think like, hey, we're raising rates, we don't care. And then inflation expectations starts coming down because people think, oh, the Fed's going to do whatever it takes. They're going to screw the economy. Inflation is not an issue anymore, but the economy sucks. And then inflation expectations goes down, and then they can kind of take the, foot off the pedal on interest rates, and the market can rebound. I don't know. That's kind of a theory I have. I'm throwing around, but I will never
I
really
mean,
know.
I think that does seem like it holds some water, though, because I mean, if you think about where the market was, even just 2 weeks ago, I think most people were thinking inflation was starting to come under wraps, and so the
Yeah.
Fed would, likely kind of ease policy into next year. The inflation came in modestly higher than expected, but still, pretty okay, I would say, month over month. Um, but like the language that that Powell was using was just so like over the top hawkish, that it
Yeah.
seemed like he was kind of trying to say like, we're gonna for sure beat inflation,
Yeah.
and everything else be damned, because we're just gonna go after that no matter what. And that will result in some job loss or some increase in unemployment, and GDP
Yeah.
decline and all that. And he's like, that's just the price we got to pay.
Yeah.
And
So
so
he's
now
sort
it's
of
like,
he's sort of stuck in a what do they call it? Like in a rock between a hard place or what? I don't know what the saying is. I forget, but he's stuck and he can't he can't listen to Kathy publicly and be like, Kathy Wood and say like, yeah,
Mhm.
it's crazy. We got to turn around because then inflation expectations could lose the battle. It's almost like he has to do what he knows. He has to present what he knows is like, kamikaze to the economy. But, he also knows that they're going to pivot soon and it's going to look bad maybe, but they're going to help save the economy that way. So it's sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place. I guess that's the same. Like, I feel like maybe that's the case going on. I'm hopeful that's the case. And they're not just trying to preserve their legacy, as many of the pundits are mentioning. So, I guess we'll find out in time, and maybe I'm sure every Fed chairman is going to be writing a book about their experience after they retire. So maybe they'll talk about this scenario, what we're in right now in that book, like this historic kind of event going on with rates.
Yeah, speaking gigs are always going to be a nice opportunity for any former Fed chairman, I think. But no,
Yeah, and
I like I
I see in the YouTube live chat, John, a lot of people watch us on YouTube live, and we got a lot of good chat comments. I try to read them while Matt's talking and listen to Matt at the same time. One good one is from John Christie. Says, I'm a purchasing agent for a major truck parts supply company. And he says, buying from close to 1,000 suppliers. He says, price increases have been flat for roughly 3 to 4 months now. So that's a good data point. It's anecdotal. I mean, the more anecdotal data points you have, the more trends you can kind of put together, maybe. But I feel like that's a good data point. What were you going to say, Matt?
Well, I mean, it kind of gets to this point which we've been talking about for a long time now, which is that the Fed is very backward looking, and folks like that purchasing manager and like Elon who are actively buying or signing contracts now for materials that are going to kind of run through their income statement and their cost structure, say 3, 4, 5 months from now. Like the the prices just take some time to work through the supply chain and to work through the economy. And so it seems like I'm becoming increasingly convinced that we do have either deflation or like some amount of just like very rigid price stabilization coming. Um, you know, I'm sure it's still going to be elevated from levels where we were a year ago, but it just seems like abundantly clear now that like the economy is slowing. Mortgage rates are through the roof. Like everything, lumber prices are down. Like all commodity prices are down, and so it's just a question in my mind of how long does it take the Fed to kind of realize that, and when do they raise or when do they reverse course? But I think when they do, that could really spark a pretty significant rally. But it's tough to call a bottom because who knows? I mean, we could have another like mediocre CPI print this month, next month,
Yeah.
and they could raise another 75 basis points and have this crazy language. So it's
Yeah.
very hard to play macro.
Yeah. 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 If the Fed is not primarily fighting inflation expectations with that theory, conspiracy theory thing, and they're really just trying to fight inflation, and yeah, they could keep this going for a long time and the market could stay depressed for a while. And who knows how much is priced in already in the market. Maybe we're at a low and we just trade sideways from here, up 5%, down 5% for 6 months, a year, or whatever. But we could also go significantly lower temporarily.
So there's a comment here from Tesla Economics. Toll Brothers Management, which is a housing developer builder, I think, is calling me every week because they're doing fire sales. Prices are definitely coming down.
Wow.
Farzad says something similar. He's seeing rents in his area are really coming down. So I think everyone's seeing this, but it's just until the you know
Shows
vaunted
up in the owner
calculations and
equity rent.
CPI,
It's
yeah,
really the owner equity rent, right? That's
owner
40%.
equivalent rent, yeah.
Owner equivalent rent. Yeah, that's 40% of the CPI. 40%. That's almost half of the CPI. And that calculation, Matt kind of did a little analysis. He explained it in good detail a couple weeks ago on our live stream. And it's just it's very delayed. Very It's like
It's
12 to
like
18 months
using a
delayed.
rolling average a little bit, where like if you use a rolling average, then huge
It's
spike
even worse, if my
increases
understanding,
are.
right? It's sort of even
Oh,
worse because like people don't know what their what they can
It's
rent their house out for until like months after real inflation has been happening in the real world. They might, and they get, don't they get like surveyed in a delayed way as well? And it's just, it's like
Yeah,
worse
so you
than
get
rolling
surveyed
average.
and, what do you think your home would rent for right now? And that's like
Yeah.
such a dumb question because nobody really knows. It is, I mean, one technical correction there, the housing portion is about 40%, so the owner equivalent rent is only a portion of that, but there's also like just pure rent, which is a much better statistic in my mind, although you still do
Mm,
have a little bit of that same, kind of lagging indicator because, you've got a 12-month contract, and so then, if prices are really spiking up in a short amount of time, then you'll only
yeah.
have roughly 1/12 of your survey respondents
Yeah.
actually reporting an increase or a decrease over time. So
Yeah. And the reason we talk about all this macro stuff is because clearly for the last 9 months, the macro market, the Fed, what they're doing has been determining Tesla's stock price, this Tesla's nominal stock price more than anything else that Tesla's business is doing. So, when people see the Tesla stock price go up or down, 10 or 20% in a week or a few weeks in the last year, it's mostly because of what the Fed's doing, not because of what Tesla's doing, unfortunately. I want to get back to a place where the market's stable and we can really just focus more on Tesla and not have to worry about, not be speaking a lot about the Fed and try to study what every comment they're making or every CPI, PCE index, thing. I don't like that part of the business. I mean, you have to do it, but it's not my specialty, and it's tough. So, moving on to like the macro market, one other macro market thing we want to touch on, a couple other things, is Russia and China. So Russia, there's further escalation going on with, I guess they're drafting. I've seen all these anecdotal things on Twitter from a few people I follow. It looks terrible from the anecdotal stuff I see on Twitter. What Russia is doing to force, its adult men to, go untrained into combat for a war they don't even want to do, like waking them up out of bed. I see stories. I don't know. Just what's up with this, Matt? What do you, what you've been listening to some, I've noticed on Twitter, you've been listening to a lot of the, the war, chat live stream thing. I mean, what's your take? I haven't listened to it as much lately, but what's your take after absorbing some of that?
yeah, I do listen to that in the background a lot.
And obviously it's
So
like, it's all, I mean, it's all like pro Ukraine. Pretty much the entire West is pro Ukraine. It's hard to put ourselves in the
yeah,
minds of the Russians. I just can't even fathom that at this point. So we know
but
we're just, it just seems from a humanity perspective, it's hard not to be on the Ukrainian side. But anyway, go on.
yeah, but it's a really important note because like so I've been listening to this Maria report. It's called I think it's MRYIA or something like that. On Twitter they do like this 24/7 spaces. And it's really good, but they're like it's very like blatantly pro Ukrainian. So there is a little bit of like information warfare going on. So you've got to kind of try to digest that and say, okay, what's the actual truth, and what amount of this is you know just kind of bias. But from what I can tell from a variety of different sources, it seems like the ever since this news of the 300,000 kind of drafting soldiers that they're trying to come up with has really like freaked out a lot of Russians. Like they don't actually want to do that, obviously. And so there's been like sold out planes, like airports full of military aged men that are just trying to get out of the area. There were some that were trying to leave over the border to, I think it was Georgia. It could be wrong on
Mm,
that. And then like Georgia closed the border to them because they didn't want them like escaping into their country.
wow.
And so it's just like it's hard to tell how widespread that is, but it does seem to be at least something of a trend. And so my take is that that's a good thing in that it makes it like where the Russians are actually feeling the price of their war on the home front a little bit more. So that can increase the pressure on Putin. On the
Yeah.
All In podcast, Chamath has talked a lot about like the mothers of Russia, which I wasn't really aware of, but that's apparently has been like a source for a little bit less warmongering in the past when mothers who lost their sons are very vocal and can kind of grieve publicly without being thrown into jail the way a lot of other protesters might be. So it certainly seems that like the pressure is starting to mount a little bit within Russia, but I don't get the sense that it's to the point where Putin is going to change course or anything like that. So
Yeah.
I still think we've got a long ways, 6 months, 12 months or so to go. But the main takeaway I have is like Ukraine has just been like stunning on the battlefield. It's been, I think, pretty remarkable how successful they've been just militarily. A
Yeah.
lot of people were not expecting them to be so successful. And on the flip side, like Russia has just been horrible.
Yeah.
Astonishing how disorganized they were, how poorly maintained their equipment has been. So it's a good thing for sure, but it's a lot of uncertainty at this point. So it's hard as
Yeah.
an investor to see through that.
Yeah, it's hard to, yeah, it's just terrible for humanity, the atrocities you see, evidence of. And it's just, war is just not good. And especially when one of the countries has incredible nuclear capabilities and they could be losing the war in a very bad way potentially. And that's the big, elephant in the room. As much as people probably would love to see Russia and Putin smothered or whatever, just you back a cat into a corner, you don't really know for sure what they're going to do. And that's the big risk I see, whether it's 2%, 5%, or 10% this year, or whatever, tactical nukes going on, just escalation. It could be really, it's like a black swan. It's not a black swan. People know it could happen, but I don't think people really not appreciate, but I'm not sure it's built into the market, that risk, so we'll see. Hopefully it doesn't hopefully you got to build that golden bridge of some sort, and you just got to buy time. I think that's what I think is just got to figure out a way to buy time and delay until Putin gets older and there's a change of guard more organically within Russia. Um, you know, that's I think the best scenario I see possibly, but I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, I kind of agree. Like a lot of people are saying, like, oh, if he could just like get assassinated or like there was some revolt or something like that, that'd be great. And it's like there are so many examples in history of when there's a power vacuum and things actually get worse. It's like
yes.
you think you remove Saddam Hussein and like that would be a good thing for sure, but then it's like you got this horrible power vacuum and the
Yeah.
country can kind of descend into some chaos. And
Yeah.
so same thing in Libya. It's like there's all sorts of examples of this. So, well, of course, I want Putin gone. It's like it would be a
Careful
much
what you
better
wish for.
outcome.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or just be
Yeah.
aware that there can be unintended consequences. So, like if the market
Yeah.
rallies 5% and like Putin's assassinated or something like that, I'm not even sure if that would happen. But
Yeah.
if that did happen, I'd be very cautious because it could get even worse.
Yeah. It's like a choice of lesser evils and unknown evils. It's like, which one do you want? Which lesser evil and which unknown evil do you want to pick from and decide? It's like, oh, I don't know. It's a tough situation.
Yeah,
But
but
yeah,
like you said, I
yeah,
can't wait to go back to just like modeling companies and focusing on fundamentals. That is like
yeah, yeah,
when macros settle down, I'm going to be a much
yeah.
happier investor.
The other geopolitical macro event that could affect macro markets drastically is instability in China. Um, China, there's, I guess, a big election cycle of some sort going on with President Xi or something, and there's rumors going around that, I don't know. What are your thoughts on the rumors? Do you think there's any validity? Do you think President Xi is going to, fall to some coup attempt or something? I don't think that's going to. I think there's just all kinds of
Yeah,
FUD being spread out. I can't see that,
I
but
don't
I
think
don't know
so
what's going
either.
on.
But at the same time, like the highest level politics in China are relatively like dark and obscure. So
Yeah.
I'm not at all banking on any sort of coup or change or anything like that. Somebody had a pretty hilarious Twitter thread where he said like, "Oh, I went out at great risk to public places to see what's going on with like the overthrow of the government," and he was just like photographing guards at Tiananmen Square, and he's like, "Paratroopers like came in and were wearing the clothes of like the normal guards, and they were reinforced with like armored personnel carriers, and there's like old people on bikes that are just like riding around town." So I kind of
Yeah.
get the sense that it really is just more business as usual in China. And sure, there could be some political intrigue of some sort, but nothing that I think
Nothing
looks kind of
radical.
radical where she is out of power under house arrest or
Yeah.
something like that. But
Yeah,
I
we
could be
want
wrong.
stability. Yeah, I think we want stability in China, especially for Tesla. That's our biggest holding in our fund by far, biggest exposure, why most people follow us. Tesla, China delivery numbers surprised people for the last week. What was it, 24,000 or something? Made in China, Tesla. We'll
Yeah, in
move
the
on to the
last.
Tesla part of our discussion here. So, yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason Tesla had a nice pop this morning and is still holding on as we're speaking, while the market is down, or the Nasdaq and S&P 500 are both negative at the moment. Tesla is still up 1.5%. So that's relative strength, right? So that's good. We like that. And I think it always surprises people, these end of quarter pushes. Like there's always, like, the last 2 weeks of the quarter is always sort of like a rush to deliver as many cars as possible. Um, any thoughts about the made in China cars?
Yeah, so
Surprised?
it was funny because this time last week, I think the numbers were 17,000 registrations
Hmm.
for the prior week, something like that, which was low relative to what folks like Troy Tesla were predicting. But now this is a higher number, so it's like, yeah, I kind of don't want to get too excited about these weekly figures that come in, and we do know that there's always this push. And so there's a certain margin of error, but like we largely know like about where it's going to come in. So I did see the numbers this morning, but I tend not to get like too excited one way or another about them.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking this month, like, or this morning, there's been all this, talk lately about how demand in China is collapsing and they're going to need to lower prices and everything like that.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of that is actually just speculation. Like the biggest news factor that's driving all this talk about like demand collapsing is just that the wait times are decreasing. But that always used to happen. Like if you remember, like the old, like forever, you'd have these end of quarter pushes and wait
Yeah.
times would collapse. And then as soon as like the quarter ended, they would stretch out again like 2 months.
Yeah.
Just because that was like the pattern of, exports first and then, local deliveries closer to the end of the quarter. So
They
naturally you're
time
going to
it
have
that
more.
way. Yeah.
Exactly. So part of this is just strategy. So like I'm kind of wondering, will we be here next week with 2 to 3 month wait times in China again, and everyone's like, oh, good, like there's no demand
Yeah.
problem in
Demand
China.
is
Like
crazy again. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know. So that's what I was thinking. Like I do think it's important to be you know cautious about demand and not just assume that there's infinite demand no matter what and you never need to lower prices. Like that's too aggressive. But I also
Yeah.
think you like the whole demand is collapsing thing might be overplayed a bit.
Yeah, and I saw a stat like a couple weeks ago, or there was a big report in China about how the Model Y in China is like the highest resale value of any electric vehicle in China, which says a lot if that's true. There's a lot of good quality electric vehicles, and that's been my concern about potential demand in China, is like the competition in China is pretty good at this point. It's not as probably, but it's marginal. Tesla's maybe marginally better than them, but not as big of a spread as in the US. All the other electric cars are much, Tesla's much higher above them. But the fact that the Model Y is the best selling used EV, has the highest resale price, or like keeps its value the best out of any EV in China. That speaks a lot to me about demand in China, still pretty strong if the used Model Ys are holding up pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a good point. The other thing I've seen a lot recently is like a market share in China and like everywhere is shrinking. In China in particular, it's kind of funny because it gets lumped in with all these like new electric vehicles that are like $5,000 or they've got like a 10 kWh battery or something like that. And it's just like when you just take these headline charts and you don't like dissect the data. I think it's very easy to get kind of lost in some inaccurate takeaways. So
Yeah.
I would just caution everyone not to get too excited on either extreme because I think it's somewhat unclear where we are right now.
Yeah. The big event I think everyone should have at the top of their list of priority of information to know. What's it going to be, Matt? You know what it is. We know it. Everyone listening should know. If you don't know what this is, what we're going to say, you got to really, you're not a good Tesla investor. so, so you're not a good
AI
long-term
day.
Tesla. AI Day Part 2, right? AI Day Part 2, Friday. That's the biggest thing. If you're a long-term Tesla investor, especially, that's the biggest thing you need to know about. And that's coming Friday, Part 2. I did not score an invite to go. Only, I think, a few people. It's not a huge event with a lot of people, but I know a couple people going. I'm excited. I'm gonna watch it live, and I mean, this is historic. I mean, I think most people, most seasoned Tesla investors agree that believe Elon and agree that the top priority is to recruit new talent for
Mhm.
AI stuff, not to excite us as investors, not to do some crazy circus show just to make us all excited. Maybe it's a circus show to excite recruitment. I don't know, but whatever it
Yeah.
is, it's going to be top priority is, you have to keep in mind, is to recruit new talent and get to the engineers that are getting into that field. So, I mean, AI Day Part 2, Tesla bot, everyone, obviously, it's like, I would be super shocked if there was not a Tesla bot fully assembled doing something, right? I mean,
Yeah.
w- what is the something that this Tesla bot is going to do? Any thoughts, man? Any speculation?
I mean, to me, the most likely outcome, and I still have a very low confidence that this is what it would do, but the most immediate task that it should be trying to accomplish is something on like the manufacturing side within Tesla. So,
Hmm.
can it, like personally, I would just be impressed if it had like, I'm taking a quick step back here, and then I'll get back to your question. But I would be super impressed
Yeah.
if they just like built the like mechanics of it, and then explained to us that they just use like AI, like neural net training, to teach it how to walk rather than like programming it. So like it fell over 1,000 times, and then it figured out like how to not fall over anymore. That would be really encouraging to me, because that would be, like the most important thing is going to be how good is the brain, like how they adapted the FSD, technology to handle this completely different challenge. And so if they can just say, a lot like we've seen with AlphaGo and all these other AI applications, that it just didn't know how to do anything. It was just a dumb body, and it taught itself through iteration how to walk or how to pick up this thing. To me, that would be really phenomenal. So I think like that would be a huge wish list item for me. And then presumably doing something related to manufacturing. So like
Hmm.
if there's some like welding, task that needs to be done, or like installing the 4680 canisters in the structural pack or something like that. Some sort of demonstration like that would be really interesting, and I get very excited about that. But I don't know. What about you? Do you have any specific predictions or things
Yeah.
you think would be cool?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking. I thought for a long time, I don't know, a while back, like it'd be cool if the humanoid robot was driving an autonomous Tesla car, or was in the driver's seat of, and it drove up in the robo taxi and got out and delivered pizza or whatever, and then walked back in the car. Last foot delivery, like a demo of that. That'd be kind of neat. But I put out a question on Twitter. I love Twitter for crowdsourcing information. I've loved it for a long time for that purpose, and sort of really excited if Elon takes it over, what he's going to do with it. I mean, as much as he's getting screwed with the valuation, I sort of hope he does take it over. So I put a question: What's the most realistic thing or demo? What's the most realistic thing or demo you think will happen? I put realistic because people are putting all kinds of wild speculation, including
Yeah.
me. And one guy, I read through I got a lot of responses really fast, and it did this like 20 minutes before the live stream, and I started reading through them. One guy, Gustav Anderson, um, I replied to his comment in there. He had a really interesting idea that just like, sometimes you read a comment and like the whole thing of crowdsourcing is like you see something that just triggers a light bulb in your head that like, oh, that seems like that's going to happen. And this guy's comment triggered a light bulb. He said he demonstrate use of simulator to train the Tesla bot tasks for later real life application.
Yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense to me because I think some people have been speculating. A lot of people have been speculating the AI Day invitation with the two hands, making that heart or whatever. Like that
Hmm.
one hand is actually simulated in graphics, and the other one's the real hand, and they try to make it look almost the same, but they're not quite the same. But it's like
Oh, I hadn't
simulation.
seen that.
Some
Okay.
people have speculated that, and because the shading is a little different on the two hands or something. So maybe there's something to that. And if that was the case, then it would make sense with this maybe because maybe they're building some infrastructure, some kind of operating system where you can train in a simulated environment with their neural networks or whatever, like the bot to do something in a simulated physical environment, and then immediately upload it into the bot to do it in real life right there. Like,
Yeah.
hey, this guy says like pick up an egg without crushing it or something, train it in a simulation dojo neural network, whatever. And then once it's done enough iterations where it gets it right, then you upload that neural network software into the bot wirelessly right there, over the air update. And then you let the bot do it in real life in front of you and see it work. I mean, that would be
Yeah.
super cool,
That
right?
would be
I think
super
that'd be
cool. I mean,
awesome.
Because that's really is like the advantage is this kind of training and like data analysis
Yeah.
backbone that they've built.
Think
One of
about
the
all the
things I
third
can't.
party applications you could do with that too, right? All the
Yeah.
third
Oh,
parties that could make businesses out of training the bot to do any task in the house, anything, and you could buy it from the store. I don't know. Anyway, go on. Sorry, Matt.
no, no, no. That's what I'm super excited. Like even the idea that I was talking about, like training yourself how to walk. Like maybe you would probably do that mostly in simulation, so that you're not damaging all the components.
Yeah.
So like that would be super cool if they just kind of went into the detail of how they're using their simulation data to actually improve this thing. And if there was a really impressive rate of improvement that they could talk about too, that would be really exciting. But I also
Yeah.
can't wait to hear more about Dojo, because that was like
Yeah.
kind of blew my mind when they
Yeah.
were going through that panel thing that they had developed. And
Yeah.
do you have any thoughts on that? Like, do you
Yeah.
think they're using it yet, like for training?
Maybe I'm wondering if they're going to do like a chip update and a dojo update. I would think they'd comment on those two things at some point as part of the presentation. And that'll be like sort of maybe you might actually like it, but for me, I'll be like, what is this? What do these words mean? What does that unit of metric equal? I don't know. It'll blow my mind off to like really listen to you and James Downward and other people like put it into layman's terms, but it'll be exciting just to hear them talking about it, that and that but I think like the thing about training right there and opening it up right away is it's not as dangerous as full self-driving. Like you have this bot
Yeah.
that can, like, you can train it in a neural network on the dojo or whatever. I don't know, maybe you just have some program infrastructure operating system Tesla's built out for this, where they can do it initially for their factory tasks, and maybe it'll go to every developer who wants to get into this business as a third party contractor to sell to other people with Tesla bots or whatever. But you could train it to do any task you want, to catch a football and play catch with you in a football in a neural network, and then upload it into real life, and now you can play catch and have a catch with the robot, at a specified distance, 10 feet away or 20 feet away. You can make it more flexible over time and build it out, because if it makes a mistake, it's not killing anyone. It's just,
Right.
oh, there's a little
Yeah.
bug in it, I got to go fix that. It's like, why wouldn't you do this? It just seems to
Yeah.
fit to me. When I saw that guy's comment, it just lit a light bulb, like that's what's happening. But
Yeah.
we'll
I
see.
want Franz and the bot to play catch with a ball bearing. That'd be awesome.
That would be cool. Yeah, that'd be cool. I mean, there's so
So
many
I saw.
cool things you could do with this bot. Like so many cool little, it's pretty crazy. Anyway.
So boil down AH said they should put the bot on the I Love Lucy chocolate factory production line. Like that's actually, like, that's pretty funny, but like I could also imagine that would be like a really great training set, just like an impossibly fast production line, and just how fast can the robot actually handle that. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, the thing that's so exciting is that there are like literally endless tasks that this could go through. And like in my own history on the energy side, there were so many tasks that were done that were dangerous, where like I was at this one power plant that we were overseeing that had like this blast furnace gas. We had to do like a CO2 monitor, because like the levels would just spike and then guys could pass out. And so like it would just be so great to have bots handling that instead of putting humans in harm's way. So
Yeah.
there's just I'm just so excited about this product, even though I do think there's not going to be like a stock price reaction. I think most analysts aren't going to get it. I think this is like a
No.
medium to long term catalyst, not a short term one. But I still
Yeah.
like could not be more excited to
Yeah.
hear what they have to say.
I see Michael How in the comments says a basketball robot that gets my rebounds. Oh, that'd be awesome. Like sometimes my rebounds go way over. Sometimes you do an air ball and you're like, oh, I gotta go get this now. But now the bot can go get it and bring it back to pass. I could just get more practice shots in. It'd be cool. Or a bot to, I practice my tennis serve, and the bot will go pick up the balls and bring them back to me or something. It'd be kind of a lot of cool things. Yeah. So
Yeah. Anything? So one other speculation around there. I saw this on Twitter. I'm not sure if it's verified or not, but there was somebody had to sign a waiver saying that did you want to get a ride, and it could be like very intense or thrilling or something like that. Did you see that kind of rumor going around?
No, that would be
Yeah. So
interesting. I mean, that would be like putting the robo taxi into it, and maybe the bot's sitting in the driver's seat, like, "Hello,
I,
where do you want to
I,
go?"
I forget who posted this, but somebody I think was speculating that it would actually be the Roadster, given kind of the language that was around there, which would
Oh
be a
wow,
total surprise. Not really related to AI Day, so I'm not sure that I
yeah,
would believe that, but I don't
yeah,
know. It could be. Um, I mean, given the language that was in there, it was like talking about how fast it would go or something like that. And the
Yeah,
Roadster's been delayed for so long, so maybe
I
they,
know.
unveil it and they say the design is final, but they're not going to go into production until 24 or something like that. I could see that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there could be some surprise with the Roadster for sure. Semi truck, I don't know. I mean, nothing's out of the, nothing. You just don't know. Like he's surprised us. One in every like four product unveilings, I feel like, or there's like a big surprise of some sort no one expected. So
How about this? A semi rolls up and just like 60 Tesla bots get out of the back. Just like jumping out, like Terminator
yeah,
style.
yeah. Or what about this? A semi rolls up. This opens up. The Cybertruck comes out of it. It opens this cab up. The Roadster comes out of that with a bot that comes out of that. Like a little. I don't know. Lots of little
And then like
robots
a
coming
friendly
out of
little Tesla bot comes and plugs them all in.
yeah, that'd be neat. That'd be neat. And I mean, the last thing about Tesla and the stock price, I mean, Twitter, right? The deposition was delayed by like 2 weeks. I mean, Elon and Parag both requested their deposition to get delayed. Do you think there's some kind of early negotiation going on here, Matt? What are your have you read anything about this?
I haven't read too much. I mean, I know Gary Black has been speculating that if a settlement was to occur, it would most likely happen before depositions. So I
Hmm.
think one interpretation, which I would tend to agree with, is the fact that both of them want to delay their own depositions. To
Yeah,
me, that strikes me as too much of a coincidence. It's not just
yeah.
like Elon was super busy and he's like, "Hey, I got to reschedule." So the
Yeah, I
fact
mean
that
that's
both
been
of
on the
them,
calendar for a while. He should have rescheduled
yeah.
it weeks ago. You'd think, right? Yeah,
Right, and this is a last minute kind of rescheduling thing. So to me, I would put a decent probability. I don't know, maybe 60-70% that there's a settlement in the next 2 weeks.
yeah,
That's kind of what I'm thinking. But what about you?
yeah. In my head, I have the story playing out where they're both like hardlining it, like, no, we're gonna go to the end and play a game of chicken here. And it's like they go right up to the deposition date and they're about to go, and then one of them, I don't know if it's Elon or Parag or their back channel lawyers, sends a note to the other, like, are we really gonna do this? Like, and then they're like, yeah, it's like a husband and wife fighting at the very end, making up or something. I don't know, like, all right, let's figure this out. But like, are we really going to do this? Like, because once they do the deposition, it's like maybe there's no turning back at that point. You've already invested so much painful energy into the deposition, and it's like even harder to negotiate or start a negotiation then. So, um, part of me thinks that maybe someone reached out to the other team and was like, "Are we really going to do this? Let's just throw a number out there, see if we're in the same ballpark."
Yeah,
Um, and that would be promising. I'm not sure that it'll go somewhere, but it's a promising development because if they can negotiate, I think if they negotiate a lower valuation, for me, that would be the best of all worlds because then Elon wouldn't be as screwed on the valuation. He could still turn Twitter into something incredibly magnificent that he could do with it. And then he'd have extra capital to buy back Tesla stock, like, so
yeah.
everyone wins, win for everyone. So I hope they do that. I hope they just negotiate at a significantly lower valuation would be best, obviously. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
my
like I
hopeful.
think 35 would be like a reasonably fair price for both parties personally. Like, I don't know.
$35
I think
or
yeah,
35 billion.
30 $35. That's probably optimistic, like a little too much wishful thinking on my part, but like I
Yeah.
don't
It's like
Twitter's
a
got some
26 or 27 billion valuation, I think. Yeah, something like that then. Yeah.
yeah, because I mean Twitter has basically avoided the entire like tech downturn this year on top of like the huge whistleblower issue that they've got and federal investigations into their practices. Like you
Hmm.
can imagine if this deal wasn't here and there was never even like a sniff of it, like wouldn't they be at like $20 or something? I mean, what do you
They'd be
think?
below 20. I think they'd be below 20 for sure. I mean, look at Snapchat. That's like its closest kind of
Yeah,
competitor. You can't see what Meta is going down tremendously. Instagram's obviously
yeah,
not thought of as finally, but if Instagram was traded as its own stock, it was a pure play in Instagram, that thing would be more than cut in half from where it was. I'm obviously Snapchat's down like 70% or 50% from where, 80%
yeah,
or so. I don't know. It's ridiculous. So, yeah, Twitter could be in the 5 to 10 billion market cap range is my thought. So it'd be like sub 20, sub 15, maybe stock price even.
yeah.
Yeah. So it would be screwed. But the shareholders of Twitter would never admit to that, right? And so they're going to use every point of leverage they can to sue the board for not for screwing them on a bad negotiation price if Parag settles too low. So it's like
Yeah.
everyone's conflicted. Everyone's in a tight spot. It's tough,
Yeah.
So I don't know
And
what's going
Parag's
to
going to
happen
lose his job at the end of this too. So like he can't be too
for
happy
sure.
anyway. Like you got to
Yeah.
negotiate with this guy that's like publicly calling you out and calling you a
Yeah.
clown. And
Maybe there's some way to build like a golden parachute for Parag and the board in some way where they're like they have immunity of being sued by the shareholders. I don't know, some protection for them so they can like get out unscathed without worrying, and negotiate a more fair valuation then. I think that would I don't know if that's possible, but if it was, that would be the way out, I think.
yeah, it doesn't sound like I haven't heard any sort of off ramp like that, but I don't know.
Yeah, me
To me, it
neither.
seems that would be a
But
good
corporate
outcome. But
law can be very inventive. Corporate lawyers and merger and acquisition, they can be very creative
yeah,
sometimes. I don't know. So who knows? I'm not in that business, but we'll find out within the next month or so, I would think. Yeah, I mean the trial is supposed to be in 3 weeks, I think, so mid-October. So it's supposed to be like 6 days maximum or so. Yeah, so maybe that gets delayed too. I don't think so. I think the judge said that she's not delaying it or something. But then there's like an appeal process that could happen. Anyway, let's move on past Tesla
yeah,
Twitter stuff. I mean, the Tesla stock price still up 1%, while the Nasdaq's down 0.5%, S&P is down 0.5%. So, yeah, we get the production and deliveries metric by between now on Sunday, probably
probably. Yeah.
Saturday or Sunday, and sometimes it's on the first day of the month, so it could be Saturday. Most people probably Sunday, but I mean, I think my estimate. What's our estimate now, Matt? Is it like
So
360, something
I've
like
had it
that?
at 360 for the last week or two. So
Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah,
yeah, and like using that number, and I did add a little currency translation risk in there, about $200 million.
yeah.
So I forget where our number was when did the model a couple weeks ago
Mhm.
on here, but I think it was like what $1.65 or 68, something like that. And with the latest numbers that I had it coming down to like $1.35, I want to say. So
Yeah,
yeah, we'll update this again when we go through, but a somewhat sizable move downward on
yeah.
just on lower deliveries and some kind of margin concerns.
Yeah. The more I think about it, the more data I've seen with China, and I know the delivery numbers for last week was big, but I think people were saying that a lot of people in the last week of China were delaying delivery and they're building cars for export earlier, at the end of the quarter now, because everyone who wanted to take delivery in China is waiting until next quarter when there's going to be some alleged price cut, maybe October 1st. But putting everything together and combine it with I think the last couple quarters, Tesla has had like very slim inventory ending the quarter, like going into the next quarter.
Yeah.
And that has not always been the case. Historically, there's been quarters where they have, instead of like 3 days inventory, they have like 10 days or 8 days of inventory or something. So I feel like that could regress to the mean to some degree. And if that happens, and given what they're producing now, then it might be like 340,000 deliveries. I wouldn't be surprised. I think that would hurt the stock price initially. I think if that happens and they announce 340 or 345,000 deliveries or 335,000, I don't think it would be that low. But if it was only like 340, yeah, Tesla stock could drop 5% real fast on that. Maybe not 10%, but I would say 5 to 7%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not really seeing any evidence of that. I mean, it does seem like there's been a pretty successful push end of quarter. I mean, you just took delivery last week. I know
Yep.
at least two other people who have. And one of
Yeah.
the tools that I use to track this, maybe I can share my screen real quickly, is this website ev-cpo.com. So
Hmm.
it just is like a website crawler that scrubs for every single listing of Teslas on their website. And so right now there's only 102 new Model S's worldwide. There's 145 new Model 3s, 37 new Model X's, and 77 new Model Ys. So like very, very slim amounts of new inventory that's available for immediate, delivery. So to me, that would kind of indicate, and this is
Yeah.
somewhat consistent, I would say, with where it has been historically, kind of end of quarter. And so to me,
Yeah.
that would indicate, that we don't have like a huge inventory buildup this quarter. So kind of does give me a little bit more confidence that we're, closer
Yeah.
to 360 or so.
Yeah, and a huge inventory buildup with Tesla is still tiny inventory buildup compared, when you think
Yeah,
about it.
so
It's like
true.
instead of like 2 days inventory, they have like 5 days inventory. You know what I mean? So I'm just thinking like even like 3 or 4 or 5 days extra inventory going into the next quarter, 'cause some extra cars are in transit on ship than normally proportionally wise, or on trains going somewhere, or just like on a truck going to a delivery hub that's late, or people are, I would not be surprised is what I'm saying. And if that happens, it would be like 340 to 345 maybe instead of 360 or something, whichever, I think a lot of people are kind of the consensus between analysts, us, Troy, and other places. It's like 360 or something. So it would not surprise me if it turns out to be, 10 to 15K less cars just because there's an extra few days of inventory this time, which, historically that's happened many quarters. And sometimes they happen in quarters where you don't expect it. And Tesla's like, yeah, we just didn't, we put a rush in, but we didn't go all hands on deck like we normally would. I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if that happens, the stock would certainly, I think there'd be a lot of short-term speculation that it would be a good buying opportunity for sure, because the earnings
Yeah.
report would still be very strong.
Yep,
But
definitely.
the actual price movement of Tesla stock on Monday would be pretty tough,
Yeah.
that's what I'm.
Well, it's going to be an exciting month for sure. Like I think a month from now, like I have no idea where the stock's going to be. I mean, there's so much kind of news coming out, both macro and Tesla specific, that I feel like we're in for some volatility.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. There's a lot. It's a crazy time for the markets and Tesla. And so, I mean, we usually touch on some other things. We've been going a long time on this stuff. So let's touch on a couple other things before we go to Q&A. Rocket Lab Investor Day. First, I want to say ARK finally dipped their toe. Rocket Lab yesterday. Yay, Rocket Lab with ARK finally get some validation. But I think they bought like 500,000 shares or 600,000 shares between their two funds.
Yeah.
I mean, at a $4 stock price, do the math. It's not like a lot of, they're just dipping their toes in it. But
Yeah.
I'm super curious. That's a really great price for them to be getting in at. I think it's like the low it's ever been. So, great price. I'm jealous that they're getting it at such a low average cost right now of Rocket Lab. But I'm super curious to see what kind of commentary or research they eventually would have to talk about with Rocket Lab, because there's some pretty smart folks there. And yeah, like
Yeah.
Sam Porras and such. I hope he put some notes out or comments about it and such. Yeah.
That would be good, because I haven't really seen a whole lot. Like they had this whole space exploration fund, but I haven't really seen any space exploration research that they put out. So I would be very
Not yet.
curious to
Yeah.
see them go into this a little bit more. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was a kind of surprising piece of news, because it's been so long that like they just avoided it for some reason. They had
Yeah.
like Netflix and John Deere and like all these other names in their space
Yeah.
exploration fund, but not Rocket Lab, which is like the clear
Yeah.
leader in small
Yeah.
sat launches. So it was
Yeah. And
definitely good to see.
maybe they saw the investor day, which was last week, that you attended actually in person,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I was at last Wednesday. What were your findings about we'll cover this. I know a lot of people want to hear Tesla or whatever. We'll talk about this for a couple minutes, then we'll go into Q&A. But Rocket Lab, what was your impressions of the investor day for Rocket Lab?
Yeah, I mean, so there were no like earth-shattering moments. I was really hoping that they'd talk a little bit about their plans for what they call the space applications business. So think of something like Starlink, that would be like a company-owned asset in space that would generate recurring high margin revenue. That's like their ultimate end goal. They've been talking about that since the D-SPAC. So I was really hoping they'd share some details on that. They didn't. They basically just said that like we're still planning on doing that. But we really need like Neutron to be developed, which is their next stage. It's kind of like a Falcon 9 competitor, but more reusable. And so they're saying like we need that to both grow our TAM for launch services, and then that will, once we've done that, that will enable us to make the next step into space applications. So that the kind of the main takeaway from everything, I think, was we have done what we said we would do. And so that they had a lot of notes kind of comparing all the different companies, what they've advertised as their payload to space versus what their actual demonstrated capacity is. And it's like, everybody is saying like we can do, huge amounts, and like they've actually only demonstrated a tenth of that or something like that.
Mm.
So SpaceX or SpaceX Rocket Lab, they've just said like, listen, we're achieving this plan, like we're on the path, we've been very successful, and we're just kind of chugging along. So there wasn't really any significant new news, I would say, from that. A couple design changes on Neutron, and I think they're going to 2 fairings instead of 4, and they changed their rocket engine cycle. So there were a couple small changes like that, but from a kind of investment thesis standpoint, there really wasn't a whole lot new, other than I hadn't seen this before. They did indicate that they're targeting, I think it was 24% operating margins.
Wow,
So
that's pretty good.
that's something that, I mean, they're a long ways from that now for sure, but I think they laid a really credible path of how they kind of get from where they are right now, where their gross margins are like in the 10% range, and through a combination of like higher launch cadence and especially kind of bringing down some of the cost on their like components businesses, that they really see the pathway to get to like really strong, sustainable operating margins going forward. So I really love the financial discipline of them. Their technology is very well proven. So no, I came away really impressed, but not with any necessarily new kind of takes.
Mm. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's clear Rocket Lab, it's becoming more and more clear that what Rocket Lab has done is pretty phenomenal. I mean, SpaceX obviously is the leader. We have to say that every time, of course, because people are like, well, SpaceX will eat their lunch. Of course, SpaceX is the leader by far. But if SpaceX did not exist, Rocket Lab would be the leader, And so
Mhm.
Rocket Lab has done a phenomenal job considering all the other launch providers can't get to orbit like Rocket Lab, and you even have the Artemis mission looking worse and worse by the day. I mean, that's a much bigger machine and bigger rocket, obviously, than with Rocket Lab. But the fact that they spent 10, 12, 15 billion dollars or whatever it is on that, and they have to like put it back in the hangar now. They're saying they have to move the rocket back into the hangar to look at it. And
Yeah.
it's just getting more and more embarrassing for the rest of the space industry, private or public. No one can get to
Yeah.
orbit regularly except for SpaceX and Rocket Lab. That's just a fact, right? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So
like
yeah,
ULA, they just had the last, I forget what it is, like Delta something launched that,
yeah,
but that's like an old version that they're not going to fly again. But that launched
yeah,
last week. But yeah, Artemis has been delayed, and it's very questionable,
yeah,
when they're going to try to launch again. Firefly, they had a lot of issues. I think they're scheduled to try their launch again on this Friday, so that's going to be a
yeah,
really important one to watch, because they're a pretty clear competitor to Rocket Lab. But like most of the others, maybe with the exception of Astra, and I think there's one other one that's had like one test rocket successfully fly, but like nobody's doing it with reasonable economics, and nobody's doing it with anything close to like the scale and repetition that Rocket
yeah,
Lab is doing on the small sat side. SpaceX,
yeah,
again, obviously clearly the leader, but
yeah.
I think they're in a really enviable position right now.
Yeah, very enviable. And so, yeah, exciting to see the next few years and as the space industry develops where Rocket Lab fits within it. Um, okay, so I guess Lemonade Investor Day is coming up in November, I think. Or yeah, it's
Yeah,
November
November 15th, I think it is.
15th. Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can go. I'm still undecided. I have to check with my wife and scheduling, and I'm gonna try to make it. Um, that's their first ever investor day, so that'd be really cool. Uh, so anyway, let's go to Q&A. If that's all right, Matt, you have some questions lined up. Any chance we can go through? We'll do the YouTube live stream Q&A for about 10 or 15 minutes. Then we'll just go right to Twitter. We'll cut the live stream and go to Twitter Spaces and invite people up to talk and stuff. All right. From IR Rizzle on Twitter, do you think $15,000 is too high a price for the average consumer to buy FSD? I do think it's too high a price for the average consumer, but I don't think the average consumers are buying Teslas right now. In the future, that will be the case. But yeah, I mean, it is too high of a price. It's a lot of money for the average consumer. Any thoughts, Matt?
Yeah. I mean, I think Elon's strategy here, like you've seen as they've continued to raise prices while increasing the functionality a little bit, but I would say the functionality improvement has not kept pace with like the price increases. So
Hmm.
I think like I think they could improve short-term margins a lot if they lowered the price. But it seems pretty clear to me that that's not the priority. So
Yeah.
I think what they want to do is get the software like amazing, then have it priced at 20,000 or something like that. Give everybody, I don't know, a 3-month trial or something like that, and kind of get them hooked on it, and then say, all right, well, if you'd like to keep using this, pay $300 a month, or buy it for $20,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think in the long run, that's a better way of capturing value. And then if they can actually solve autonomy and like robo taxis and all that, then the value's a lot higher. So I think Elon, if I'm trying to read his mind, I think he truly believes that this is like a economic value of like $40,000, $50,000, something like that. And so it doesn't make sense to charge $7,000 today for something that in 2 years will be worth a lot more. So that's
Hmm.
kind of what I think.
Yeah. I agree. From Farzad, how you doing, Farzad? I like your new setup. I saw your live stream or your Twitter, your YouTube yesterday. I like the new setup and the glasses. Keep it
The new
going. All right.
picture though, I missed this one.
Yeah. Question: what are the chances the Fed makes a sudden shift to dovish language in the same way they suddenly made a 180 when they were saying transitory inflation? That's the conundrum. That's the multi-trillion-dollar question right now for the markets. Yeah. Do they make that sudden shift? Sooner or later, they have to make a shift. Um, and whatever the shift is, people will view it as sudden. Uh, so they have to communicate some kind of shift. The shift or pivot, is it going to be sooner than people expect or later? I guess that's the expectations of when the consensus of when they expect it to happen. I saw some people pricing out Fed futures as being like, and that would indicate like the high 40% chance of like the highest interest rate being set in like the summer of next year, at like 40% chance of that being like 5.25% or between
Hmm.
5 and 5.25%. But that seems a little too late for the shift
I
to me. I
agree.
don't know. I feel like the shift would be significantly sooner. But I don't know. I mean, if they're really just fighting inflation expectations, I feel like they could shift their language much sooner than everyone thinks. But if they're really just like trying to snuff out inflation and throwing the economy away in the process, it could, and that's their intention, then they can keep that going until next year, summer of middle next year potentially. I don't know. Yeah, Matt, you think? What
Yeah,
do you
I
think?
agree. I mean, like 40% chance that the peak rate is hit next summer. That just seems too late to me. Like to me, I'd say there's only a 20% chance or 15% chance that it goes that late. I think the CPI figures are going to really turn around in the next 6 months, and that will kind of necessitate either the peak maintaining or potentially even the Fed reversing course and lowering rates. So I don't know. I'm skeptical that it would be that late.
Mhm. From Via Kanush on Twitter, do you think it's necessary for Tesla to announce Model 2 or Q due due to a recession or postpone it as a backup for depression? I don't think they're going to announce a Model 2 or Q anytime soon. I don't. I think the Cybertruck, the Model Y is eating the world. They can lower the price on that if they need to. As they lower the price, every time they lower the price like $5,000, demand like more than doubles or something. There's some supply demand kind of laws or things there. So I don't think they're going to introduce a Model 2 anytime soon. Maybe in China. I don't know. There's this China Design Center. I feel like there's got to be something that comes out of there soon. So maybe they'd have like a specific China model for Tesla, because China's much further along on the adoption curve than the rest of the world. I
Yeah.
think like 25% of their new vehicles are being EVs right now, which is crazy. When in the US it's like 6% or something. So, or 10, less than 10%. But China is really much further along. So if they do it somewhere, it might be China first. But I still don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon. Do you have any thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they did announce that tomorrow or on AI Day. I had this,
Hmm.
thought when I was on Farzad's channel a while ago. There's the bots with the heart, and
Hmm.
AI in Chinese is actually I, like the A and I together is I, which is the
Mm.
Chinese word for love. And so I was thinking, okay, maybe there's like that's like some hidden messaging that like the Chinese design studio vehicle is ready to be unveiled at this event. and there's it could be a little bit more Chinese focus. So I'd put a low likelihood at that, but it was a kind of conspiracy theory thought that I had, that maybe I'd found something for the first time ever in my Tesla life.
Possible. Yeah, that'd be possible.
They
All
they
right,
do like
let's
little.
do
Go ahead.
little what? What were you gonna say?
Just little Easter eggs and that sort of thing.
All right. Let's make this the last question here on the YouTube live stream. Try to keep that to about an hour, and then we'll just cut over to Twitter Spaces for anyone who wants to continue following along. Just go over to Twitter. So Bertman Max on Twitter. How does foreign currency translation and the strong dollar affect earnings per share? Is this included in your model? This is a very good question. It can. I'm guessing it hurts a lot, but what do you think, Matt? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so you kind of need to think of the cost side of the equation and the revenue side of the equation. So like for U.S. deliveries out of Fremont, the strong dollar doesn't really impact very much, because most of the materials are sourced locally, paid for in U.S. dollars. So that doesn't really hurt. But when you start looking at exports, then like the fact that the dollar has strengthened a lot relative to like the euro and especially the pound and the Australian dollar, then your revenue side of the equation can get hit a little bit. But it's important to keep in mind that like most of the exports these days are from the Chinese plant from Shanghai. So you've got your costs there denominated in yuan, and like most of the, I think, what is it, like 40 or 60% of the deliveries out of Shanghai. I never know whether to go with the actual pronunciation or the Americanized pronunciation, Shanghai or Shanghai. But most of the about half the deliveries are for the local economy there. So again, you've got Chinese yuan denominated costs and Chinese yuan denominated dollars, and so the only foreign, like when Tesla reports them, then you've got that gross margin, which you have to like adjust back to US dollars. So there's like that piece of it, which is a little bit of it. I think it's like a 6% decrease, something like that. And then for your exports, you got, let's say euros in revenue and yuan in dollars. And so then again, you kind of adjust those, the margin implications of those, and then translate the kind of gross margin impact back to dollars. So I went through that exercise earlier this week, and it was coming up with a little over $200 million of impact. So there's a lot of uncertainty around there, to be clear. I mean, it's possible, for example, that, they've got some, raw materials that were, priced in dollars or something like that. And so then you could actually have a benefit on your, Chinese cost side potentially. So it's just unclear. And it's possible that Tesla hedges these, although they have said in their regulatory filings that they don't typically hedge foreign currency risk. So I would suspect that there's some amount of a like foreign currency translation issue that does hit the income statement this quarter. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. All right. Well, we'll leave it at that with the YouTube live stream. Leave us a comment if you like the new thumbnails we're doing. I think we're generating them from DALL-E, right, Matt? Is that what we're doing? Or
yeah, so this is my own very poor handiwork, so they're still not that great. But yeah, we're getting prompts from DALL-E and trying those thumbnails, and then adding our embarrassingly cropped faces. So we're trying to improve them a little bit, make them a little bit more fun, and yeah, let us know if you like them or have other ideas of what we should do.
Yeah, we're trying to do some different stuff there in the channel just to play around. All right, cool. Well, we'll end the live stream there, Matt, and we'll stay on Twitter Spaces. Anyone on the live stream wants to keep listening live, go to Twitter Spaces. If you listen to recording on YouTube, you can go to the recording on Twitter Spaces to catch the end of it, and many other great conversations on Tesla Tuesday there.
Yep. Thanks, YouTube.